asshole, liar, business person who will do anything to get ahead. And Alan Stanford was that myth. He was perfect.
Alan Stanford is a sociopath.
He's one of the richest men in the world. He used the money on yachts and private jets, had homes around the world, and also to prop up his empire.
In 2008, Jonathan Agnew, a seasoned cricket commentator for the BBC, was at Lord's Cricket Grounds in London, one of the most prestigious cricket venues worldwide. Jonathan, a bald man in his late 40s with thin oval glasses, witnessed an unprecedented event. A black helicopter with gold trim descended onto the hallowed grounds, an area strictly reserved for members. This act was incredibly bold, and the man getting out of the helicopter was just as impressive. Tall, tanned, with a mustache and slicked back hair, Sir Alan Stanford exuded both intimidation and charm. Alan, a Texan billionaire in his late 50s, had made his fortune running an offshore bank in Antigua. That day, his charm won over the traditionally rigid authorities of British cricket. Jonathan watched in disbelief as members of the English and Welsh Cricket Board rushed to greet Alan, practically rolling out the red carpet for this audacious intruder. Alan's brashness peaked as he chest-bumped a British official, a scene that left Jonathan scandalised. Inside, the spectacle continued as Alan showcased a plexiglass box filled with $50 bills, totaling $20 million. This display of wealth was both mesmerising and unsettling. Sir Alan, resembling a taller John Cleese, had used his immense wealth to benefit Antigua, funding hospitals, schools, and his pride and joy, the Stanford Superstars cricket team. His presence in London was to propose a high-stakes match between his team and England's cricket team with a winner-take-all cash prize. The sheer audacity and size of the prize seduced the cricket world, and England agreed to the match. Alan appeared to have the cricket world under his spell, but Jonathan's instincts told him something was amiss. For nearly 2 decades, Alan had eluded scrutiny while generating dubious returns from his offshore bank. However, the SEC and the FBI were closing in on him. Just months after his grandiose display at Lord's, Alan found himself ensnared in a legal and financial quagmire, proving Jonathan's suspicions right. The world soon witnessed the fall of a man who dared to challenge the conventions of both banking and cricket. Sir Alan Stanford was one of the most audacious scammers ever known. With sheer bravado and cunning, he duped financial clients, the sports world, and even entire nations. His lavish lifestyle included private jets, his own cricket grounds, and estates for numerous girlfriends scattered across the globe. For decades, he evaded authorities, spending billions of dollars unchecked. But when the financial market crashed, Alan's empire of deceit crumbled, exposing his fraudulent schemes and stripping him of his knighthood, fortune, and freedom. This is the story of Sir Alan Stanford, the Lord of the Lies. Before revolutionizing the cricket world, Alan was a young man with big dreams in Waco, Texas. He hailed from a family of moderate means, but was surrounded by neighbors who were heirs to oil fortunes. This proximity to wealth fueled his ambition. In 1975, 25-year-old Alan, a large man standing at 6'4" and weighing over 300 pounds, known as Big Al, and his wife Susan owned a gym called Total Fitness Center. It was one of the first in Central Texas to feature fancy Nautilus weight machines, charging a hefty $1,000 a year for membership. Alan and Susan expanded to bigger markets like Austin and Galveston, achieving massive success. Alan drove a white Jaguar and even landed a helicopter emblazoned with the gym's name on its outdoor track, a testament to his ostentatious persona. The helicopter was leased, but it symbolized Alan's priority, flaunting his wealth. Alan's personality was as grand as Texas itself. He was known for his arrogance and tyrannical management style. His infidelity was equally notorious, with a girlfriend in every town, as an employee later revealed to Vanity Fair. However, the early 1980s oil crash devastated Texas's economy, and Alan's fortunes plummeted. Total Fitness went bankrupt, leaving Alan and Susan $13 million in debt. But this setback didn't deter Alan. Determined to rise again, he sought a place where he could make the rules. In the mid-80s, James Davis, an accountant for a refrigeration company in Michigan, received a call from Alan. James, a soft-spoken Baptist and Navy veteran, seemed the polar opposite of Alan, yet they were college roommates and best friends. Intrigued by Alan's new venture, Guardian International, an offshore bank in Montserrat, James flew to Houston. Guardian offered high returns on certificates of deposit, CDs, by exploiting lax offshore banking regulations, targeting wealthy Latin American clients seeking financial stability amidst volatile political and economic conditions. Guardian's operations were lean, with minimal staff and overhead, allowing them to promise higher returns than US banks. However, within months, Allen asked James to falsify financial statements, claiming higher profits to attract more clients. Unbeknownst to James, they were running an elaborate Ponzi scheme, using new clients' funds to pay returns to older clients. Despite suspicions, James complied, driven by Allen's assurances and the lack of regulatory scrutiny. By 1990, Guardian had claimed $100 million in accounts, but mounting regulatory pressure from the UK prompted Montserrat to revoke their license. Allen swiftly moved operations to Antigua, rebranding as Stanford International Bank, SIB, but the fraudulent activities continued unabated. Allen ruled with fear, manipulating employees with a toxic mix of flattery, intimidation, and bribery. James, now SIB's controller, blindly signed off on unverified investment numbers provided by Allen. In a bizarre request, Allen once sent James to London to send a fax regarding their CD insurance. Allen revealed that their supposed insurer, the British Insurance Fund, was only a nominal entity with articles of incorporation but no real operational backing. The document he was supposed to fax was a letter assuring a potential client that the British Insurance Fund was backing SIB's investments, a blatant lie. This moment crystallized for Jim that the entire operation was fraudulent. Despite his realization, Jim chose to remain silent, motivated by a mixture of fear, loyalty, and cowardice, as he later admitted. Allen rewarded his silence by promoting him to CFO and adding him to the inner circle of family and friends on the board of directors. Jim had fully committed to Allen's scheme, hoping that somehow legitimacy could be achieved. Throughout the 1990s, Allen expanded his bank and deepened his ties to Antigua. A pivotal moment came in 1998 when a local Catholic priest exhibited stigmata-like wounds. Allen claimed he transported the priest to New York on his private jet for treatment, solidifying his image as a benevolent and powerful figure in Antigua. This act, along with his financial contributions, endeared him to the Antiguan people. By 1999, Allen had become an Antiguan citizen and began offering financial support to the government, which struggled with corruption and debt. He loaned the government $65 million for infrastructure projects and started acquiring major local institutions, including the Bank of Antigua, a local airline, and the island's largest newspaper, making him the largest private employer on the island. Allen's acquisitions were all funded by his clients' money. By 2002, SIB's assets had ballooned to $1.7 billion. To cement his influence further, Allen forged a powerful alliance with Leroy King, Antigua's head of financial regulation and a former Bank of America executive. In 2003, Allen and Leroy performed a blood oath ceremony, symbolizing their bond. Leroy, in exchange for over $200,000 in cash bribes and perks like Super Bowl tickets, ensured no one scrutinized SIB too closely. When the SEC began inquiries in 2005, Leroy, with Allen's guidance, reassured them that SIB was legitimate, claiming any fraud would have been detected by Antiguan authorities. Allen also employed numerous former SEC and law enforcement officials to shield him from investigations, successfully dodging scrutiny for years. However, as SIB expanded and hired more employees, not everyone was willing to turn a blind eye. In the mid-2000s, Allen Stanford aggressively recruited new financial advisors across the US, offering irresistible perks. These advisors earned 1% to 2% commissions on CDs sold, significantly higher than the industry standard, with additional bonuses for higher sales. The allure was so strong that internally the money made from selling CDs was dubbed bank crack. Advisors also enjoyed access to the company's fleet of private jets and could win luxury cars for outperforming their colleagues. In 2005, middle-aged advisors Charlie Rawl and Mark Tidwell joined the bank, attracted by the promise of a lean, efficient operation. They brought their extensive client lists and began steering customers towards SIB's lucrative CDs. However, doubts soon crept in. Mark's clients started receiving letters from the SEC seeking information about SIB's promotional practices. Management downplayed the SEC's interest, framing it as a routine review and assured advisors that a major law firm was handling it. After about a year, the tension eased, and Allen assured everyone that the SEC was satisfied. Despite these assurances, Charlie and Mark remained uneasy. Allen's increasingly lavish and ostentatious lifestyle only heightened their concerns. In the mid-2000s, Allen threw an extravagant party for top salespeople, transforming a Manhattan hotel ballroom into a recreation of Studio 54, complete with white horses, go-go dancers, impersonators of Grace Jones and Andy Warhol, and a performance by members of the Village People. The party allegedly cost $25 million. Allen's spending didn't stop at parties. He had multiple corporate jets with SIB's Golden Eagle logo etched on everything, including the toilet seats. He donated millions to political candidates, seeking favor from anyone who could influence offshore banking regulations. He even took $2 billion in personal loans from the company. His exploits were legendary, from lengthening his yacht by 6 feet at a cost of $12 million to suing a New York school principal for calling him a neo-colonialist. Allen also fathered at least 5 children by 3 women other than his wife, ensuring they all lived in luxury. In 2006, Allen was knighted by the government of Antigua, becoming Sir Allen Stanford. Despite this accolade, his employees grew increasingly concerned. Allen's extravagant lifestyle drew unwanted attention, and a mutiny was brewing within his bank. In June 2006, financial advisors, including Charlie and Mark, were instructed to destroy any documents not on official SIB letterhead, raising red flags. When they voiced their concerns, they were dismissed. A year later, another meeting emphasized not putting concerns in writing, further alarming the advisors. Regulators were closing in. In late 2007, Charlie and Mark learned that Allen had to pay a $20,000 fine to FINRA for not clearly stating some risks involved in their CD offerings. Alarmed, they decided to leave the company. In December 2007, Mark confided in his supervisor, Jay Como, about his intentions to resign due to the company's shady practices. Charlie soon followed, drafting a detailed resignation letter outlining his concerns, including the destruction of documents during an ongoing SEC investigation. Instead of accepting their resignations, SIB fired them and sued for the return of their signing bonuses. Charlie and Mark countersued, alleging they were forced to commit illegal acts for the company. Despite SIB's attempts to discredit them as disgruntled employees, Charlie and Mark had gathered substantial evidence of the company's dubious practices. They compiled a dossier, including marketing materials falsely implying CD insurance and proof of misrepresented mutual fund performance. Determined to expose the truth, Charlie and Mark prepared to hand-deliver their documents to the SEC, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation that could bring down Allen Stanford's empire of deceit. Charlie and Mark, realizing the gravity of their situation, decided to hand-deliver their documents to the SEC's offices in Fort Worth, Texas. They were paranoid that Allen and his associates were onto them, so they took separate cars and routes, constantly checking their rear-view mirrors until they both safely arrived and made the drop. Their actions were timely, but no one foresaw the impending market collapse in the fall of 2008. Independent financial advisor Alex Delmatti, from his South Florida home office, watched the global financial system unravel. Alex, in his late 40s with dark hair and a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, fielded panicked calls from clients, including one who had significant investments in SIB. This friend wanted Alex's opinion on the safety of his money. Alex dug into SIB's public financials and discovered alarming inconsistencies. Forbes had recently estimated Allen's net worth at $2.2 billion, and he had been named World Finance Magazine's Man of the Year. Despite this, SIB's reported investment gains of 10% to 16% annually seem suspiciously consistent, especially as other banks reported losses due to the market crash. Alex's skepticism deepened when he found that SIB had avoided the subprime loan disaster by claiming to avoid risks they didn't understand. The more Alex investigated, the clearer it became that SIB was not legitimate. He compiled his findings into a report, which was published in a Venezuelan financial magazine in January January 2009, just after Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme was exposed. The report caught the attention of financial blogs, and soon major news organizations like Businessweek and Bloomberg picked it up. Meanwhile, the SEC, jolted into action by the Madoff scandal, was ready to move against Allen. At the same time, SIB's top executives, led by Chief Investment Officer Laura Pendergast Holt, were holding emergency meetings in Miami. Laura, mid-30s, brunette, and tall, was shockingly inexperienced for her role, but had risen through the ranks due to her loyalty and connections, including a past affair with Jim. She revealed that SIB's portfolio was heavily reliant on so-called other assets, including real estate and personal loans to Allen, with $2.5 billion unaccounted for. As investors demanded their money back, SIB faced a run on the bank. Allen's executives panicked and held multiple meetings where Allen tried to reassure them, even as some threatened to turn on him. Laura, when deposed by the SEC, lied about her knowledge of the bank's inner workings, following Jim's instructions, but her loyalty couldn't save the sinking ship. Days later, the SEC froze SIB's assets and raided its Houston offices, charging Allen, Jim, and Laura with running an $8 billion Ponzi scheme. Allen attempted to flee, first chartering a plane and then flying commercial to Virginia. He stayed with one of his girlfriends while law enforcement gathered evidence. An ABC News reporter cornered him at a restaurant, leading to a confrontational interview where Allen dismissed accusations as baloney and complained about flying commercials. Meanwhile, Laura was charged with lying to the SEC, and Jim quickly began cooperating with authorities, cutting a deal to turn on Allen. By June 2009, Allen was arrested on 14 counts of fraud, destruction of a federal investigation, and conspiracy to launder money. He pleaded not guilty, trying to pin the blame on Jim, but Jim's testimony was damning. The trial, which began in December 2011, lasted 6 weeks. Jim, now in his mid-60s and visibly aged, testified that Allen had bullied him into perpetuating the scam. The jury found Allen guilty on 13 of 14 charges. After the verdict, Allen insisted he wasn't a thief, blaming the government for the collapse of his bank. He argued that the SEC's false accusations triggered the bank run that led to his client's losses. Alan Stanford's argument during his trial was essentially that if he hadn't been caught committing fraud, no one would have known about it, and everyone would have received their money. It was a seamless, yet absurd defense. During his sentencing, prosecutors pushed for the maximum penalty of 230 years. Victims stood up to speak about their losses. One man called Allen a dirty, rotten scoundrel, sharing that he lost everything, including the ability to pay for his autistic grandson's medical treatment. Another woman revealed that 3 generations of her family lost over $4 million due to what she termed Allen's financial terrorism. She asked the victims in the courtroom to stand so Allen could see them all, but he turned and reportedly stared them down without remorse. Ultimately, the judge sentenced Allen to 110 years in prison without parole. In contrast, Jim faced up to 30 years, but after pleading guilty and cooperating with the government, he received only 5 years. Jim expressed deep remorse and regret for the rest of his life. Laura pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, being released in 2015, and Jim followed in 2017. Allen, however, continued to file appeals from his prison cell in Central Florida, with his latest appeal denied in 2023. The story delves into the trust issues within the banking system, showcasing how ordinary people blindly trusted these institutions, unaware of the risks. Allen's empire crumbled, leaving a lasting impact on victims and shaking financial trust. Allen's extravagant lifestyle and arrogance led to his downfall. He insisted he could have maintained his scheme if undisturbed, a common claim among exposed scammers. Yet, the damage was done. His attempted escape, capture, legal battles, and the victim's emotional toll illustrated greed and deception vividly. Alan Stanford's case also exposed philanthropy as a guise for unethical activities. His financial contributions to Antigua, meant to enhance his image, proved empty. The island, a real victim, suffered immensely from his deceit. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Alan Stanford's downfall. If you enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe to Secret Sleuths for more true crime stories and mysteries. Stay tuned.